So originally I wanted to make a video just analyzing the menu and HUD design in Mario Kart 8, but then I started talking about the HUD and I fell down a rabbit hole of the HUDs throughout the entire series and how they've changed. Now I think I've gone too deep, so I'm just going to make this video strictly about the HUDs throughout the series, try to explain some of the design decisions behind them. Now at this moment there are 8 mainline Mario Kart titles, and it feels weird saying that considering that Mario Kart 8 came out 8 years ago, and this video will strictly be about the console titles. I don't think I'm going to be looking much into Tour, as vertical layouts and mobile games have different priorities when it comes to HUD design. Instead I want to talk about each of the different HUDs throughout the console games to see which elements they chose to display on screen and where they decided to put them. Heads-up displays, abbreviated as HUDs, are the graphics and information that the game deems necessary to provide to the player, yet are not supposed to be too obtrusive to take away from the core gameplay of the game. So finding the balance between what HUD element is deemed necessary and compact and which ones are just unnecessary. From what I've gathered, there are 4 main elements that are displayed in the HUDs of these games. There's the position counter, the minimap, your current item, and additional information such as timer, the lap count, or your coin counter. There are actually a couple additional UI elements that only appeared in a certain number of games, such as the miles per hour meter only appearing in Double Dash, or the preview of the top 4 races of the race with their portraits, or in the case of Mario Kart DS and Mario Kart 7, the top 8 on the bottom screen where you could also see all their items. Fun fact, the top 4 and top 8 preview has actually appeared in the majority of the game, 5 of them, while it's been absent in only 3 games, Super Mario Kart, Mario Kart Wii, and Mario Kart 8. To me, showcasing the top 4 races of a race gives a very arcadey feel to the game. I associate it mostly with Mario Kart 64 and Mario Kart Double Dash, as those are the ones that feel the most in your face during the race. But the way they're styled is super arcadey, and the way they animate up and down whenever a position changes has always been interesting. But I think they've chosen to not use it in more recent games, as it starts to feel obsolete once you already have both the minimap and the position counter, as whenever the player uses these pieces of information, they can allow him to understand what the top 4 or top 8 preview would have allowed him to learn, with the exception of being able to see the other team's items. What I just remembered is that actually Mario Kart 8 on Wii U, there's actually a top 12 preview on the gamepad, where you could see everyone's placements and items. This would be removed in Mario Kart 8, as there was no clean way of putting it on screen, and to be honest I had mostly forgotten about it until right now. But it's interesting that the gamepad used the bottom screen similarly to how Mario Kart DS and Mario Kart 7 used it. When it comes to the position counter, throughout the series it's actually been in a lot of different places on screen. In Super Mario Kart it was at the bottom right, in Mario Kart 64 it was at the bottom left, then it was bottom left again for Mario Kart Super Circuit, then it moved to top left for Mario Kart Double Dash, then back to bottom left for Mario Kart DS, then stayed bottom left again in Mario Kart Wii, before moving to top right, the switch up of the century, in Mario Kart 7, before then going to bottom right in Mario Kart 8. So it's officially been in all 4 corners of the screen. But why? Now the placement of UI is pretty subjective, but it's a topic that's really interesting to me, so I want to try and explain my thoughts about it. There are certain UI elements that just feel right in certain spots on screen, such as health bars mostly being on the left, or mini-maps mostly being on the right. There's just some elements that feel like they make more sense in certain parts of the screen, as they seem to be placed in a position that feels easy to find and natural to look at. And in regards to eye contact, there are a couple theories as to what looking up or looking down implies. For example, looking up is understood as searching for new information, and while heads-up displays are almost all built around the display of new information, I think the reason it works this way is often because of the camera of the game. Since this is a game that has a camera following right behind the character, looking down implies you're looking closer to where the cameraman would be, whereas looking up is like looking into the distance. So when you look down, you're kind of gaining more information about the character and what position they're in and where they are on the map, whereas when you look up, you get to see additional outside information, such as the lap count or the time, and then also the item. This theory doesn't hold very often, but I think it's interesting to think about HUD placement in these theoretical ways sometimes. I think the most problematic placement throughout this series this is Mario Kart 7, since in that game, the position counter is in the top right of the screen. But since you're already looking between the top screen and bottom screen so much, it would make so much more sense for that element to be at the bottom of that screen, at the bottom left or bottom right, so that you could see it in passing while looking at, the lap count or the items that people have. Because as it stands, they are in two separate directions. Now personally, the item Roulette Box, which is oftentimes a conditional UI element, meaning they only shows up when you actually grab an item box or have an item, has been pretty consistent on where it showed up on screen. It's almost always at the top middle, at the top left of the screen. And at this point, it's been in the top left corner for the past 5 games. I'm pretty sure it's gonna stay there for the rest of the series. But I think it's nice to have a consistent location that you can look to if you want to know what item you have. And the way these frames have been designed have been either rounded rectangles or squares to kind of simulate the shape of a roulette wheel, how it's a rectangle and you can see the items scrolling through it. But in Mario Kart 8, actually they changed it to a circle, probably because almost all of the items actually fit very nicely in a circular shape, so it'd be kind of a waste of space to have a square, so it saves on space a little bit that way. Additional information like the timer or lap count or coin counter have been all over the place. But something that's been pretty consistent is that the timer has always been in the top right. Even in Mario Kart 8, where the timer is not natively on screen during online races, it does appear in the top right during time trial. I do think it's interesting that sometimes these elements are grouped together, like how in Mario Kart Wii, the lap and the time are stylized the same way and are one above the other, but in other games they take entirely separate corners and have different colors or styles to them. Starting with Double Dash, the position counter has actually used the Super Mario font. And while the stylization of it has changed a little bit, it's always been a 3D looking font with the 2 additional letters changing depending on the country or the region. As for the lap and time, their fonts have actually changed a ton throughout the series. Sometimes they're in a pixelated font, sometimes they were in that same Mario font, other times they were in a serif font, and other times they're in a sans serif font. Starting in Mario Kart Wii, they actually started using a 7-segment display type font to display the numbers for the timer and the lap. And that is a tradition that has remained up until today in Mario Kart 8. The 7-segment display is the font that's used in microwaves or ovens, as it's one of the cheapest ones to use, as there's only 7 little LEDs that need to turn on or off. And it's also used very often in vehicles and cars. And a lot of people associate it with racing and driving as a whole, so it makes a ton of sense for it to appear here. With the exception of the games where the minimap takes up the entire bottom screen, which includes Super Mario Kart, since in that game half of the game is the minimap, at least in one player. Apart from that, the minimap has always been on the right side of the screen. Sometimes top right, sometimes middle right, and sometimes bottom right. The general rule is that it's always slightly translucent, so that even though it's a huge HUD element, it doesn't cover up too much of the screen. And even when it does cover up, it's slightly transparent, so you can still see what's behind it. And that's about it. HUD design is a very interesting subject to me, since it's not only about the design of how things look like on screen, it's also about the mentality of where it should be on screen. And the importance of seeing these elements in a fast-paced racing game like Mario Kart is undeniable. When you're always on the move, you always need additional information at a quick glance, and it can't be in an awkward or hard-to-read location, since you don't have a lot of time to look off of the road. Yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for 500 subs. Thanks for a unexpected ton of views on the last video. Definitely more logo design related or Xenoblade related videos coming in the future for sure. So yeah, take it easy.